Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video I'm going to do the Read Smart tag. I was tagged in a video by Pat at bookchat by Pat 8668. I'm just going to repeat what Pat said to properly credit the creator of this video. Creators, actually. For Pat, the Read Smart tag is an original tag created by To Readers It May Concern and Prose and Petticoats. There are 9 prompts in this tag. The first prompt is, what is your strategy to stay focused and engaged while reading? I mostly read books in my room, so mostly it's quiet. I do live with my sister, so if, say, she had a phone call, I would shut my door, partly to give her privacy and partly so that I would have privacy myself to read my book. This doesn't work as well in the summer though, because our house air conditioners, neither are located in my room, so it can get pretty warm. Another thing I'll do is I'll insert noise reducing earplugs, so that will filter out the noise somewhat. One thing I do too is, like, because I'm retired, most days I get up and read for an hour or so. I do this before I even eat anything. I just get dressed up, get my book out, and start reading. And it's usually very quiet then, quiet and peaceful, so noise isn't an issue. If I'm reading outside of my house where there's distracting noise, in particular at a car dealership, the car dealership I go to used to have a TV that was on and the sound on, and I find that very distracting. In that instance, I had earbuds, actually Bose earbuds, and I would insert them, and they would partly reduce the noise just by insertion. And also I would put music on if I wanted to reduce the noise more, because even though when I read normally I don't read with music playing, it's preferable to the kind of things they have on morning TV. I am able to read outside the home if I desire. Say I'm at the local mall. It's not really a problem for me if people are talking at the next table. For some reason, the TV noise bothers me a lot. People talking don't bother me too much as it is. It could be if it was kind of screechy and stuff, but I am able to get engrossed in that situation. Mostly prefer, though, when I'm out not to read, because I'd rather take in what's going on around me and enjoy the moment. So most of my reading's at home, but it is good when to like reading when I'm in a place that I'm stuck for, say, a couple hours. Another thing I do is if I find that I'm losing focus on a book, I just, whether I'm starting to get sleepy, tired, or for whatever reason I'm losing focus, I will either move on to another book or just stop reading and do another activity. The second prompt is, how does your environment influence your focus and what can you do to optimize it? I read best at home in a quiet environment. As I said in the previous prompt, I don't even listen to music usually when I'm reading. Because I'm at home, it's easy to control the environment. If there is noise, whether it's in the house or outside, say somebody's sawing some wood or something, or doing some construction in a house that's near, I'll put in noise reducing earplugs. That reduce some of the noise. Or if the noise is within the house, something's going on with my sister, I'll just shut my door so I can control the environment. And regular house noise, like an air conditioner going, doesn't bother me. Even though it can be kind of loud, it's kind of a steady noise, so it doesn't bother me. The third prompt is, what methods do you use to retain and recall information from what you read? I don't really have any. I read for pleasure, both fiction and nonfiction books. And the number one reason I read books is I enjoy reading books. So I don't really care so much about trying to retain information. Certainly when I read a nonfiction book, whether it be a nature book or a history book, a book of that nature, I do try to understand stuff. But I don't try to understand stuff in the same way I did when I was a student. And it was important for me to get as much information as I could from a book because I would be tested on it. I certainly like to learn stuff when I'm reading a book. It's just that there's only so much effort I'm going to take to do so. This is actually true even of self-help books. I will retain what I retain, but retention is not my primary focus of reading. Like I said, I read because I enjoy reading books of all types. The fourth prompt is, how do you approach difficult or challenging material? I think some people may answer this prompt as like a difficult or challenging material is stuff that is dense and kind of hard to read. Maybe it was a classic and the language is different. I'm going to answer this question as if difficult and challenging material is about topics that I have trouble reading about, such as misogyny, racism, homophobia, transphobia, classism, abuse of animals. Basically, topics where people in a group are being ill-treated because they're part of that group, or animals are being ill-treated, topics like that. And the way I handle such topics is I don't want to just not read about them, but this is where the fact that I'm a mood reader and an emotional reader plays into it. I will read a book for a period of time, and I'll put it aside, and I won't pick it up again until I'm in the right mood to read about that topic. And frequently when I do, then I'll go like a while reading it again, and then I may put it down and pick it up a while later. And I'm able to pick up a book, it could be several months later, and I can pick up where I left off, which I guess means like maybe where I talked about retention, the previous question, maybe I retained better than I think I do. But the only negative of this is sometimes when I do this, I put down a book and I never pick it up again. The fifth prompt is, what role do note-taking and annotation play in your reading process? The only time I annotated was in a recent buddy read that I did. And we did this buddy read on Storygraph. So I found that annotation was quite helpful because I'd be reading the book, physical copy of the book, and I would find something that I wanted to comment on in our buddy read. So what I would do is I would highlight it, use a tab. I wouldn't even always write the comment in the book yet, but I would know to go back at that location and look at it. I didn't have to, every comment I got, go right then enter in a Storygraph. What I would do is like, I would get a series of comments, things I wanted to add to the buddy read, to our discussion, and I would do it like later in the day all together or later in the next morning all together. It enabled me not to have to stop every time I had a comment. So in that respect, it was helpful. Beyond that, I don't think I would do it. I don't generally reread books, and I'm not generally going to go back and look at comments I made. I don't read to the depth that people who add comments and notes typically do. And I'm not knocking the process. That's fine if you want to read to that depth. I've seen a lot of videos where people do it, and I love their enthusiasm and how it helps them. It's just not something that I would do. It's just not the way I read books. Once I'm done with a book, I'm generally done with it. And even if I read a sequel a year or two later, I'm typically not going to go back or even skim the previous book. The sixth prompt is, how do you balance reading for pleasure with reading for personal or professional development? I'm retired, all my readings for pleasure, and that's true of even self-help books that I maybe try to get something out of them, but mostly still the primary reason is reading for pleasure. In my working career, my jobs were as an engineer and technical writer, and those jobs required a considerable amount of research. Early on, the items I would write about were frequently electronic items, and way back when we're talking in the 80s. But if there was, say, some component, a integrated circuit, some type of transistor, something like that, that I needed to write about and learn about, what I would have to do then was I would have to contact the company, frequently Texas Instruments, and actually it was contact by phone because that was well before we had any internet. I would call them up and they would send me a book. And it was actually a book, not a pamphlet. It was often a quite thick book. I think they were colored orange. And so I had to go through that book and try to glean information from them. In more recent years, thanks to the internet, that information is generally online, so I was able to find information that way. So I did have to do a lot of reading of books and technical documents to do my job. And at that time, I wasn't reading as much at home. I don't know if it had to do really as much about the fact that at work I had to read those type documents as the fact that I just didn't have as much time to read. And sometimes it's easier to just... Reading does take an effort, and sometimes after spending a day dealing with difficult, detailed topics, I may have not wanted to read as much. I will say that I never did go too long without reading. Reading's always been part of my life. There were periods I didn't do much, but it wasn't too long of a gap before I read something again. The seventh prompt is, what is the importance of setting reading goals? For me, reading goals do direct my reading. I started on Storygraph in February 2022, and I established some book and page goals for the year, which I've continued to do in 2023 and 2024. And those did somewhat direct my reading, because as I previously stated, I'm a mood reader and an emotional reader. But that would sometimes, I'd be reading so many books and I'd start a lot of them, I'd never finish them. So establishing the goals on Storygraph did more direct my reading. So I do find I'm more likely to complete books than I was before. So it's helpful in that respect. I did find, though, earlier this year that short-term goals, like monthly goals, they just don't work for me. That's too narrows my choices away from the mood reading, emotion reading I like to do. So, a yearly goal can work, but shorter term goals can't. And I also want to say, too, I have relaxed a little bit on my goals. This year I might have established a slightly, or maybe more than slightly, aggressive book and page goals. And I would certainly like to achieve them, but I'm relaxing a little on them. As an example of a couple of types of things I do like the goals, I'm taking part in a couple of reading events. They are Historathon 2024 and Book Trek 2024 Star Trek Summer Readathon. Both these events have easy to achieve goals. They're spread out over a period of time. Even if I was to miss reading for a month or even a quarter, I could do it the next quarter. These events are really to encourage people to read in these areas, history and Star Trek. And I really like the looseness of the goals. And if you want to read more than the goals, that's fine. But they're not super strict on the time frame of when you have to read the books. And there's a lot of leeway in the books you choose too. It's kind of up to you. The criteria are fairly wide. So these are the kind of things that help because I can do these. An event where, say, I had to read 6 books in a month of a certain type of book, that wouldn't work well for me. And I learned that lesson earlier this year, like I said. And the 8th prompt is, what are some strategies for overcoming reading slumps or lack of motivation? Early this year, I realized I was a reading slump, January, February. And my way I tried to get out of this reading slump was that I tried to read cozy type books, low stake books, books that weren't that intense. And then I read a pretty intense book by the name of Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. It really drew me in. I care what was happening to the characters. And I realized that although the cozy, low stakes books have a place in my reading, I do need to balance them with the more intense, in-depth books that really totally engross me. And so, contrary to what I think a lot of people do to get out of a reading slump, for me, I can't let myself just totally read the cozy books because that doesn't work. I need to make sure that I achieve a balance. I can alternate between the books, but it can't be a long period of time without these more intense, in-depth, engrossing books. And as far as to keep my motivation, the thing I need to do is to put aside a book that's not working for me, whether it's just the time of day or whatever, particular day, or it's just not working in general. I need to put it aside and not think I have to power through that book. Just move on to something else. Likely come back to that book at a later time, but not just try to force myself to read a book that's not working for me and thinking there's something wrong with me, but it's really the book just isn't jiving with me at that moment. The ninth prompt is tag some people. Consider yourself tagged if you're watching this video. If this is something you'd like to do, please do it. If you're a booktuber or you do videos, I'm sure I'd be interested in seeing your answers to these prompts. Or if you don't want to do a video, you don't do videos, and you'd still like to answer them, please answer one or more of them in the comments. I would definitely be interested in reading your responses. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to be notified when I upload future videos. I hope you have a wonderful day.